Welcome to our Microscapes unit, where we're going to be focusing on the pen and ink techniques. This workshop explores the minuscule and micro in the natural environment, and you guys are going to discover the different small structures that are existing within the small discarded elements in the environment, such as leaves, seeds, barks, twigs, grass, and other fallen debris. This project is going to involve you guys collecting, selecting, and organizing all of these natural objects on our walk in order to create a small collage. This collage is going to be something that you're going to look at for a display board. So as this display board, you're going to have it propped up and you're going to draw exactly what you see in front of you. So listen up for a couple of tips as you start to collect, start drawing, and start adding to your final compositions in this Microscape unit. So when I go out for my meditative walks, I always look for natural objects that are interesting to me. They're interesting textures. I also pick up a lot of these different kinds of examples, so multiple. So if I find a cool flower, I want to get 2 of those flowers. And that helps me because I can repeat it throughout the composition. I also look for maybe different shapes, different textures. You want to create things that look similar to each other, but then you also want to create things that look different from each other. And that's going to make something really, really interesting in the end. In this example, the longer leaf is used to divide up the composition throughout the middle. If you discover a large natural object, it can also be used creatively, but it won't take up too much space if you do it like this. So we're going to take a nice meditative walk and look for other natural objects that speak to you. Remember, choosing to keep multiples and gathering more than you might need. And I always remember to keep any of these objects in a bag with me. Try not to crush them up on your way. And remember that when you're walking out, you don't want to pick up or tear anything off of a tree or a bush. What you want to do is look for discarded objects, so that way we're not interfering with the natural landscape. Be careful not to add too many objects as well. I always try to think about what would look best on the display board. So if this particular example looks like it has a little bit too much, so maybe we would take away from the bottom, or maybe we would take away from the sides in order to keep it more organized and a little bit more clean. This is also going to help you out because we're going to be looking at so many little details when you're drawing it that you want to make sure you're not going to be spending your entire time on this assignment. These objects are also going to be applied with tacky glue and tape so that it stays adhered throughout this whole thing. Because remember, we're looking at these display boards the entire time you're working on this project. We're not going to take a photograph of it. It's going to be right in front of you, and we're going to practice those observational drawing skills. So after we create our collage, we're going to create a small detailed drawing. First, only in pencil, super light. Then, once the pencil is done and the different objects are placed within the composition, you have it divided up, you know how to begin, we will add pen. Just like before, we're going to start to think about using cross-hatching, hatching, and stippling. But also we're going to start to think about how can we use pen techniques to add different kinds of textures. So we could see things like a wood grain. How could you use your pen to show that? So here we go. We're starting to look at some examples of some drawings. So after the drawing is done and you start to add your pen techniques, we're going to focus in on an area to add color. So these are placed right in the center, but there's a variety of ways you can add color to your assignment. Remember, it's only going to be a small addition. It's not going to take up the whole thing because our main objective is the pen techniques. This small area is completely chosen by you, so think about which of the areas would make an interesting focus to your work. Think about which of the areas would be an interesting area to add color to. You can also think about how you can add a background to this area as well to create more of a focus to it. I love to see the unique ways that people add color to their work. Remember, the color shouldn't add or take up too much of the space, but it's just a nice accent to your work. This student example, she doesn't have a lot going on inside of it. It's a little bit more empty than we might like, but the details that she has in the drawing, in the pen techniques, are really, really, really focused. And she added 2 focus areas for her color pencil areas. Remember, we're still working with values, we're still working with texture. We're not going to ignore any of that just because we're adding color. We're going to bring it all together. This example of a student uses color in a different kind of way. She didn't want it to overpower her composition, so she used the blue lines. But my favorite part of this project is the way she used stippling. Remember, when you're using your pen techniques, it's up to you to decide which pen technique is going to work best in your objects. And this student really used stippling in the best way possible inside of those leaves. And she used it in a different way. Sometimes the stippling added a shadow to the veins of her leaf. And sometimes the stippling actually went completely around those veins. And it just is such a gradual values. They are such gradual values that it ends up turning out really nicely. In this particular student example, the pen technique on the branch in the back is really strong. If the student used something like stippling, it wouldn't be as appropriate as this line work that they decided to use to show the wood grain. So it is all up to you to decide which pen technique is going to work best. I have found that the pen techniques like cross-hatching and hatching work better in larger areas, whereas stippling works better in smaller areas for more small details. So now we are ready to begin our meditative nature walk. Find any natural objects that speak to you. Find out what interests you. Look for different textures and shapes and lines. Arrange them in interesting ways to bring balance, unity, and rhythm to your composition. Use different pen techniques as necessary for your objects. Decide what's going to work best to show that object's texture and to show the way light is hitting that object. And finally, add color to help your viewer's eye move throughout your composition. So let's go outside and have some fun.